Hello guys, my name is CJ. Welcome to the first episode of CJ's Guide to American and World History. If you enjoy this video about the Battle of Lexington, then please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out. And you can also, if you would like to, check out my main channel, my other channel, Master5327. It will be linked in the description. So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Lexington, April 19th, 1775. So, yeah, let's get started. So, early on the morning of April 19th, 1775, there was alarm in the town of Lexington, seeing as they had heard that the British troops, then they just called them regulars because Paul Revere did not say the British are coming because people back then still considered themselves to be British citizens. So saying the British are coming wouldn't even make any sense because they consider themselves to still be British. So he just said the regulars are coming. So they received word that the British regulars were coming out of Boston. So the militia gathered and then just basically stood there for a little while. And then nothing happened pretty much, like at all. So they basically just got bored and went home pretty much. And well, some of them stayed in the tavern. And then very early in the morning, again, this is like an hour or two later, I would assume, they hear that they hear shouts that the troops are there. So they run out and then they see a bunch of red-coated soldiers just marching towards them. So they get into formation and stuff. And then they basically just stand there for a while. Quite a long while. They literally just stand there. The leaders of the militia and British troops kind of like argue with each other. The leader of the militia was Captain John Parker, and the leader of the British was Major Pitcairn. There was also a British colonel, but I have forgotten his name. So it was like British colonel and then Major Pitcairn leading the British, and then it was John Parker leading the militia. So again, they just kind of argued with each other for a little bit, and then Major Pitcairn ordered his men to seize the weapons of the militia. Except, well, actually, at first he ordered them to surrender their weapons, but when they didn't, he just ordered his men to seize their weapons. So the men just like kind of came forward, and then they start to like charge at them, and then as this was happening, someone fired. It is still unknown who shot, but it was known as the shot heard around the world. And then immediately afterwards, the British and the British soldiers and the American militiamen immediately started shooting at each other. And everyone, like all the officers, were trying to get their men to stop firing, which failed miserably, and no one stopped shooting, and then more people kept shooting. In the end, this left, out of the, 80 or so militiamen that were there, 8 were killed, 10 were wounded, and 1 British soldier was wounded. Yeah. Kinda went worse for the Americans than it did for the British, which kind of makes sense because the British were like a trained army and the militia only like drilled like once a year or something like that. So then after that, the British were like completely fine. They only like one of their guys got hurt a little bit, but yeah, and they had just killed a bunch of colonists. So the officers, the British officers, were understandably like mad at their troops for doing that. So they just like kept marching towards Concord, where there were had heard that there were some stores of ammunition there, which is why this all happens. The British were trying to get the rebel ammunition. So the British marched to Concord, and then they actually found some powder and weapons and stuff, which they burned. Like they found it, they burned it, but they didn't find as much as they were looking for. But then, as they were doing this, the militiamen, some of whom had come from Lexington, and some of whom were like local from Concord or other nearby towns who had heard about the fighting in Lexington, they gathered and like talked, and they saw the fire in the center of town. So they thought that the British were burning down their town. So they obviously did not like this. So they marched towards where the British were, and they saw that the British were like on a hill, like across a bridge. So they were about to like cross the bridge, like they were trying to cross the bridge, and then the British officer actually ordered his troops to tear apart the bridge, which they started to do, but they only got like half a board of wood off the bridge before the Americans got there. So yeah, that plan to stop the Americans from crossing the bridge by tearing apart the bridge kind of failed miserably. And then the colonists chased the British soldiers back to Boston, shooting at them like as they went. I think they killed around 70 British soldiers on their way back to Boston. And then the British soldiers were pretty much completely trapped in Boston until the end of the Siege of Boston. So, even though it didn't really start out well for them, I feel like it ended quite well for the colonist, rebel, militiamen, whatever you want to call them. So, yeah, the colonists lost the Battle of Lexington, but they won the Battle of Concord. So I'd say they won overall because, you know, they won the Siege of Boston, which was quite significant. So, yeah. So that's pretty much it for this video. Again, please be sure to like and subscribe if you have not already. Really means a lot. Please check out my other channel, like I said, Master 5 Story 27. There will be a link for that in the description. Bye, guys.